So I'm Orla Keane and I'm a researcher in Teagasc Grange. Irish cattle production aims to maximise the contribution of grazed grass to lifetime feed intake of the animal. But of course, one of the consequences of grazing is exposure to gastrointestinal parasites or gutworms. So there are a number of different gutworm species that can infect cattle, but they all have a similar life cycle. So adult female worms in the gut, they lay eggs, and those eggs pass out with the dung onto the grass. The eggs hatch into larvae, and the larvae then move out of the dung onto the grass, where they are eaten by grazing animals. The larvae then go to their site of infection in the gut, where they mature into adults that lay eggs, thus completing the life cycle. So when calves are born, they're fully susceptible to gutworms. However, suckler calves, because grazed grass isn't the major contributor to their diet early in their life, generally gutworms are not a big problem in suckler calves in the early and mid-season, and it's usually closer to weaning, when they have a much greater grass intake, that gutworms can become a problem. So in most years, suckler calves only require minimal treatment. Yearlings, if they don't fully develop immunity in their first year, yearlings may require treatment for gutworms. Now, there are a number of different products available to treat gutworms, but they all belong to one of three classes. So these are the benzimidazoles, or the white doses, levamisole, or the yellow doses, and the macrocyclic lactone, or the clear doses. So it's important to note that once resistance develops to one product in a class, then all of the products in the same class are generally affected. And this is because all of the products in the same class have a similar mode of action. So if you have resistance to one white drench, you generally have resistance to all of the white drenches. So we know now that resistance has arisen on a number of cattle farms in Ireland, and that this is an issue that farmers will need to deal with in the future. It's important that we reduce our reliance on anthelminthics, and one of the ways that we can do this is to reduce the exposure of naive animals to worms. So there are a few different ways of doing this. One way is to graze calves ahead of the cows. As the cows come along behind them, they will clean up the pasture after them. If you have cattle and sheep, then mixed grazing of cattle and sheep can also reduce exposure. And this is because the worms that infect cattle are not the same species that infect sheep, and vice versa. So one of the risks for the development of anthelminthic resistance is underdosing. So it's really important that when treating an animal with an anthelminthic, that they're given the correct amount of product. So in order to do this, it's best, if possible, to weigh the animals, or weigh a few of the largest animals, in order to calculate the dose rate and to dose to the rate of the heaviest animals. It's also important to calibrate the dosing equipment to ensure that the correct amount is being given. Another risk factor for the development of resistance is the number of times that we treat. So it's important to try and reduce the number of treatments that we give. One way to do this is to make sure that we only give a treatment when we know that it is needed, by using reliable indicators like performance average daily gain, or the level of parasites as determined by the fecal egg count. Fecal egg counts can also be used to determine what products are effective at killing the gutworms. Recent research from Grange has shown that anthelminthic resistance has now been detected on cattle farms in Ireland. Therefore, it's very important that farmers are aware of this, and that they implement sustainable strategies now, so that resistance doesn't develop further, and that we maintain the efficacy of the products that we have available to us.